Epik Mellon podcast, conversations with the real humans behind broadband networks, cybersecurity, and the future of communications. Brought to you by QA Cafe. In this episode, Josh Seidemann joins me to talk about the state of broadband in the rural areas, and how independent ISPs can act as technology leaders for their neighbors and their communities. Welcome to another episode of the Epik Mellon podcast. My name is Jason Waltz from QA Cafe, and I think I'm on episode 24 at this point. I'm going to start losing count, I think, as we get more of these in the books. We're doing it bi-weekly, right? So at the end of the year, I kind of did the count. I was like, wow, I can't believe that's how many we did in that. I have with me Josh Seidemann from NTCA, the Rural Broadband Association, who I've worked with way in the past when I was working with UNH, and but through Broadband Forum and all the other stuff I do, stuff keeps coming up, and so I really wanted to talk to you guys in some capacity, so that our listeners can kind of get the feel of what's going on in the rest of the world, because we hear, we're always dealing with the theory and not the practice all the time, right? So yeah, I have some points to bring up before I go. Obviously, Epik Mellon is entirely funded by my employers at QA Cafe, and so the views expressed by myself or my guest do not reflect those of QA Cafe or its leadership, and I imagine the same goes for you.
I'll do my best.
Which is not to say that things won't be informed and official, but don't take everything that we say to heart. So, as Epik Mellon podcast is brought to you by my employers at QA Cafe, we have three great products that keep this all going. The first is CD Router, which is the industry standard test platform for broadband gateways, Wi-Fi routers, and other customer premises equipment. CD Router contains thousands of fully automated test cases designed by network experts, covering feature validation, stability, certification, and performance all at one. Moreover, CD Router's world-class support team acts as an extension of your own, helping you understand the technologies and build better products overall. Second is CloudShark, which is the way to make network packet captures an easy and useful part of your cybersecurity workflows. CloudShark helps you work on tough issues together without passing around large trace files, losing data, or risking security leaks of valuable information, and helps entry-level analysts learn from your senior experts, curate best practices, and standardize operating procedures around packet captures. That actually keeps coming up, actually. And maybe we can talk about this after, but the skills gap that sort of exists in the networking world right now, and how you have a lot of experts out there that know what they're doing, but there's a lot of green folks out there that are just coming on, and there's like nobody in the middle. And so we try to build tools that sort of help that, but I'm curious about getting your thoughts on that in a minute. Lastly, QA Cafe's Passport is a fully automated solution for testing the connectivity and interoperability of IoT and smart home devices. Testing with Passport is as simple as connecting your device, selecting tests, and getting clear pass-fail results with full log data and packet captures to find and resolve bugs before they become a bad review of your product on Amazon. To find out more about CD Router, CloudShark, and Passport, visit us at www.qacafe.com. All right, Josh, welcome. We finally did it. I'm sorry I had to move you around a whole bunch, but man, there's so much stuff going on right now. So you just got back from a tour, right?
Yeah, it keeps us busy. We have members and clients throughout the country, so it's no shade on any of the places that we go to. We've got for our major company meetings will be in the big cities, but going out to Dodge City, Kansas, or Cheyenne, Wyoming is not out of the ordinary, and they're terrific places to visit, and I enjoy going.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I'm familiar with the NTCA, but let's talk about what it is that you guys do, because I'm not sure everybody's familiar with the situation that requires an organization like yours, right? Because there are people who it's not economical for them to really get up to date on any of the latest technology or how to get funding or all this stuff, right? Because a lot of them are very small, right? And there's just not the resources. So I appreciate people like you guys. So, but go ahead and tell the rest of the world what that is about.
Sure. So, put yourself in the shoes of the Bell Company in the first part of the 20th century, and you're building out San Francisco and Chicago and Cincinnati and Cleveland and all these major and mid-sized cities, and you're not really interested as the Bell Company in going out to put in a capital intensive network infrastructure in a small community of maybe 5,000 people or even 10,000 people. So at that time, you had a number of these independent telephone companies that came up. And there used to be several thousand. And over the years, they would interconnect with the Bell system. And that's why we had this, there's a long regime of local calls and long distance calls.
Right, right, right.
All sorts of regulatory stuff. A lot of that just kind of changed over the years. There was the breakup of the Bell Company in 1982. So then you had all the regional Bell carriers, and I think it was Jon Stewart, one of the comedians on late night TV, had this kind of map that showed the breakup of the Bell Company in the early 80s, and then suddenly they all came back together again and morphed into 18. But our members have always remained independent. I think there's about 1,000 left, and maybe I think around 1,100 of those small companies left. We have about 850 in our membership. And these are typically small companies on the average, about 6,500 customer accounts, 35 employees per company, population densities in their service areas of about 7 to 9 people per square mile. Yeah, I know. Wow. And again, there's a clustered town center, and there might be the outskirts. But again, it's these economies of scale that you spoke about. Despite those economies and those kind of small scale, they've got fiber optic broadband deployed to about 80% of their customer locations.
Oh, wow.
So what we at NTCA do for them is really provide the services that you might have. You might have a large national company with national coverage that might have in-house counsel and in-house lobbyists. We provide that for these small companies. So we represent them before federal regulatory agencies and rulemaking proceedings. We represent them on Capitol Hill. We provide educational programming. We have an affiliated company that does health insurance and retirement benefits administration.
Oh, cool. So it's like total package of being able to get them to function as larger organizations. Then that's
exactly. Yeah.
Cool. That fiber number is crazy to me. So like, over what period of time has that happened? Like, I don't ever want to like say out loud the decrease of DSL in the world, but it's happening, right?
It increases year over year. We run an annual survey of our member companies, and they're available online. If you just look up NTCA, just Google NTCA Broadband Survey Report, and if you in each annual study will document the change from one year to the next. But if you download one from 10 years ago and you download one from this past December, what you'll see is the average speed capability that our members offer is certainly increasing year on year on year. Mm-hmm. The speeds to which subscribers are signing up for service is increasing year on year on year. And that fiber connectivity, the number of locations served by fiber is increasing year on year. And then, of course, there's that balance. It's you have 100% locations. So if you're increasing the fiber, it means that the DSL served locations are beginning to drop down. But no one's building copper anymore. That's been the case for years.
You heard it here first, folks. Don't let Tom Starr hear. Wow, that's it's like, I don't know. It's extremely heartening that that's happening, right? Mm-hmm. Part of the reason I assume is just because it actually has become more economical, but also it is because of the funding that's coming along too.
Yeah, it's the funding, it's the market demand. USDA, for example, provides a number of loans and grants in their programs. You cannot apply for any sort of those programs and tell them that you're going to build copper. I don't know what that's like. That's like, submitting an engineering study to use leaded gasoline in your car in the 1970s. So.
Good, good, good. No, it's good that, so yeah, I mean it's good that that's happening. Is it is there a big sort of learning curve for that, or is it sort of something that, like the people who are doing the fiber deployments, obviously it's companies that are good at doing that, so they're not
Yeah,
taking the total ownership of that whole process, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's no, any of these companies that still have copper left in their network. That's again, that's legacy, and that's on the line to be upgraded to fiber at some point in the future. So, after the last 10, 15, however many years of doing fiber deployments, they're fairly fluent in the process and how to get the job done.
Cool. Cool. So the latest funding stuff that's come out, and like BEAD, is
Hmm.
that the one?
Yeah,
Did that largely come out of COVID? Because it, like, obviously the broadband divide is huge, right? And I don't
yeah,
think people truly understand. It's the same thing with public transportation, right? Because people are like, oh, the U.S. doesn't have trains, and it's like, do you understand how big this place is?
right. I mean that, and it's really interesting that you say that because if you take a look at the Constitution itself provides for postal roads,
Right.
which was on the framers' minds because compared to European countries, this place is enormous. Compared
Completely
to
enormous, right?
right, compared to France, compared to Britain, with, places where they were familiar. And you come to the colonies, it's huge. Um, I don't even know why we brought that up. Oh, BEAD, COVID.
Yeah.
So there were there were a lot of COVID. There were three major COVID relief bills that were
Right.
passed, and those had billions of dollars in them for infrastructure development. And there was some that was earmarked for broadband, and there was some that was just earmarked for infrastructure that could have included broadband. The Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, which followed on the heels of COVID, really then came up with this $42.5 billion for broadband, and
Right.
that was aimed at filling in the gaps. And how that came out of COVID, what really steeled congressional interest.
Well, I imagine it's because, and I hope, I obviously have never read any of their conversations on this matter, but
Right,
all of a sudden, this thing that was a nice to have was an
right,
absolute critical necessity to everyone in a matter of months, right?
right. So NTCA has the bragging rights of being able to say that we were pushing things like telemedicine 3, 4 years before COVID, and uh, we've got a program called Smart Rural Community, and we published a report in 2017 that started to quantify the economic benefits of deploying telehealth systems in rural spaces. And to this day, I didn't write the report, so I can brag about it. It was a colleague of mine who wrote it. But to this day, if you're doing rudimentary research on rural telehealth and economic impacts, that's the report that will always come back in a Google search.
Huh.
Within that first page of results that you're looking for, that's the one that's going to come back. Uh, and we shopped this around on Capitol Hill, and we did other reports on the economic benefits of rural broadband. And if we visited an office delegation that had a lot of urban spaces in their district, the reception was polite and courteous, and why don't you help yourself to some candy on the way out, and don't let the and then came COVID.
Yeah.
And again, we like to take a fond look back at the pandemic, uh, and then suddenly everyone on Capitol Hill, their kids are going to school remotely, they're engaged in telehealth, they're working from home,
Yeah.
and it's like this giant light bulb illuminated. And again, this wasn't rocket science. This was, now we get it. We get it because
Right.
now we have a visceral experience and understanding of what this means.
Which is kind of sad that it had to come to that, but
Listen, I take the victories where we get them.
yeah.
If
No,
you
that's
said
cool.
before about my views not representing my employer, I'm sure that the organization would have a more politic way to say that.
Right. So that's cool. Oh, so remind me about that report too. So after I'll try to throw it in the links for the show, because I really feel like more people need to hear stuff like that. Because one of the things that I eventually want to get to talking to you about is the experience of these tier two, tier three guys, um, becoming more than broadband providers, right?
Right,
Because
right.
what everybody else is dealing with is, and there's was some amazing results from the last survey that the Broadband Forum did. Right,
Mm-hmm.
the standards organization that I work with the most often is the Broadband Forum, and we did a survey that was sort of a follow up from a previous survey about, it's 111 operators from around the world, and it was, plans for the future around various things. And one of the really, really, really compelling things about it was that speed, connectivity speed, was going to lose average revenue per user over time, right? Because it is inevitably going to go up, but it has to become cheaper, right? And so all of a sudden, all these operators in a position are like, well, what are we going to do? And becoming a this happened last week, right? These conversations happened last week for me constantly, where it was like, okay, um, what? How is it that we become more than a dump pipe and more than just a utility to more like an actual provider of services that people recognize and want to engage in, right? Rather than being like, oh, it's the internet provider, whatever it is.
Right. So,
So it's
so go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
So, I think there's two ways to look at it. You can look at it as broadband as a general input technology, and this is the technology that enables the production of other goods and services across the line.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Then you can look at the broadband provider as almost a collaborator with other industries to help those industries identify and possibly develop apps or other solutions that rely on the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's this whole program we have, this whole smart communities program. What we're encouraging in that program are these local broadband providers to get together with those other sectors in their communities, whether it's healthcare, education, public service, public safety, and to have this meetings of the mind, because I don't know what you need. I don't really know what you need in healthcare. I mean, I've got an idea. And the healthcare provider might have an idea of what the technology can do, but if you can get these people talking with each other, and the healthcare provider can say, listen, I've got this need, and how do I solve this? And the technology provider, wait a minute, I've got an idea. Or I know of a technology firm, and it's whether it's video conferencing, it's whether it's virtual reality, augmented reality, which is all getting bundled into telehealth these days.
Right.
You've got that opportunity to really use technology to transform lives.
Right. Right. So when it comes to the people on the operator side at your level that are involved with this stuff, how often is it, what's the range of personality types, I guess, is it like more often, a company that was built by engineers first and they sort of figured out everything else later? Is it the other way around? And I ask that question because a
Right.
lot of those things that are required to enable some of those services are very specific technical challenges, right?
So I think if you take a look at our company membership, about 60% of our companies are commercial. And when I say
Yeah.
commercial, they're small businesses and often owned, family-owned business, or they're cooperatives.
Right.
Uh,
Oh yeah. Okay.
and again, these are companies that have been around since the 1930s, 40s, 50s. So it's not these aren't companies that sprung out of Silicon Valley.
Right.
We do say, and you mentioned skills and workforce before, we do tell our kids you can have a job that's as technically demanding as Silicon Valley right in the middle of Kansas with these companies.
Right. Right.
But I think by definition, these are just, bright people who understand the technology and understand their communities and are committed to both and committed to bringing them both together.
Right. Good, good, good. No, that's good. And I was saying those specific technical challenges because it's like now that we're getting into we're finally getting people to understand that not all traffic is the same, right?
Right.
And that you have to do different things for different use cases. Telehealth being probably one of the biggest ones because no, it's like, yes, low latency is important for gaming, but it's critical to living to life when you're dealing with this new thing, right? That so I wonder about the these operators having the context to be able to fix things in their view of the world and then understand how it's already being addressed in other areas of the network and stuff like that and be able to take it home, and especially Wi-Fi, right? Because one of the things we deal with all the time now is that uh, something that was previously um, very consumer focused, right? It's consumer electronics, right? Like Wi-Fi is consumer electronics. Broadband, the internet access was a consumer electronics product first before it was a telco product, right? Because we just, like you were saying, it's like back when it was just the infrastructure of local calls versus long distance calls, and all uh, all AOL ever did was just buy some phone numbers, but like you never got internet access from your telephone company. That didn't happen for a very long time. So now they're involved in doing this, and the experience of the end user is that they're getting, they experience their connectivity, including their Wi-Fi, through that operator. And so when something doesn't work, they're like, oh, I'm going to call my internet provider because my Wi-Fi doesn't work. But before now, that was entirely in their wheelhouse, man, not even knowing that it's supposed to be, a consumer thing, right? So like, are are the tier twos and tier threes that you're dealing with, like, is that something that is now acutely understood? Is there some sort of educational package, for lack of a better term, that's bringing them on board to this point of view that they can do more and they probably need to do more in that space, or is it something that they're already sort of acutely aware of?
I think they're aware of that, and I really think that they see themselves as the technology leaders in their community. And
Cool.
we always say that wireless needs wires, and whether that's your cell phone network, whether that's your home Wi-Fi, because ultimately, if you follow your Wi-Fi to the signal point, it's a modem that's plugged into the wall somewhere. Um, so it's they see themselves as that way. They might not, they might provide the modem, they might not manufacture the modem. They've got you can buy modems off the shelf and plug it into the system, but we half joke that when your toaster doesn't work, you don't call the electric company. What we find, though, is that our members, customers, if it's their phone, if it's their laptop connection, whatever, very, very often it's that local ISP that gets the
Oh
call
yeah.
that really could be going to somebody else. So they do see those. They see those opportunities to provide managed services, to
Cool.
provide networking services, to be the community leader on cybersecurity.
Oh, cool,
Uh,
cool.
yeah,
That's good because that's come up
yeah,
a lot lately, especially with device proliferation, right? And
right.
it's like,
right.
and again, I feel really bad because now that now that all this stuff that was previously not connected is connected, you're sort of seeing this huge like train wreck, for lack of a better term, right? Of two worlds smashing together, and neither of them originally thought that they were responsible for it, but whoever gets blamed is the one that has to take responsibility.
Let me ask you: are you still using the default password on your smart TV?
Oh yes, absolutely, of course I am. Because why?
Well, you should go on and change that now.
No, no, but that's the whole point, right? I know what I'm
Right,
doing, but
right,
I'm late. But I'm lazy. Imagine
right.
not knowing anything about it at all, right? It's not the consumer's responsibility to deal with that.
So and again, that's a lot of that can just be, and a lot of that is education,
Hmm.
and that's one of the benefits that you have when you're working with a community, when you're working with a locally operated ISP that's really rooted in the community, either as a
Yeah.
cooperative that's owned by the subscribers, or a family-owned business that's a big part of the community. There's a different sense of shared responsibility.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I bet that changes the dynamic a lot when you can be like, not, it's like literally the people that I actually know are helping me with this, right?
Right. And again, it goes both ways. On the one hand, it's, hey, I've got access to the general manager of my company because I saw him at the grocery store. And on the other side of the fence, you have the general manager of the company that says,
Trying to take support tickets while he's just,
I need to shop. I should need to shop in the next town over. I can't go shopping without someone coming over to me and asking me a question.
yeah,
Uh,
that's funny.
but it does change the dynamic, and it's a point that we make with policymakers regularly, is that um, companies that are publicly traded, understandably, they've got a number of imperatives, and they've got shareholder needs that they need to meet, and shareholder expectations, and that's why the investments are really going to be focused primarily on where they're going to be able to create the strongest ROI.
Right.
And our operators that are locally based are not publicly traded. And really, the ROI that I think they look for is uh, it is about the number of locations served. It is about the sort of technology that they can put in. But I think they also consider, as part of their return on investment calculus, how many of our high school students were able to take a course through
Cool.
distance education that they couldn't take because we don't have 50 students in our high school of 300 students, or who are in line for an AP Mandarin or an AP Physics class.
Right.
So can we aggregate different students from across the region to get them into these specialized courses?
That's cool. That's really cool. I like that. So like what would you say is the biggest challenge that most of them are facing right now?
Not money. I mean,
Yeah.
hey, listen, this is a capital intensive network.
Yeah.
So, the funding and the financial certainty is always, and regulatory certainty is always a big question. We're fortunate we have a universal service fund, and the purpose of the universal service fund, and this is baked into the statute from 1996,
Hmm.
um, and that was, congressional directive that the FCC administer this fund, and the purpose of this fund is to make sure that rates, and again, we talked about the population density before. If you have a mile of network in a rural community, you might only be serving 50 customers off of it. A mile in an urban center could be serving thousands of people if you have apartment buildings and,
Right. Right.
subdivisions. So the question is, how do you spread, if those high costs are spread over fewer customers, how do you make sure that those rates remain affordable?
Right.
And that's where the Universal Service Fund comes in. It has 4 programs, and here we have a little bit of a civics lesson. One of those programs is called the High Cost Fund, and the purpose of that fund is to make rates reasonably comparable in these high cost rural areas, make those rates, the subscription rates, reasonably comparable to the rates that are charged in urban areas.
Right.
So that's a way to achieve affordability. And then
Right.
if it's still unaffordable, we have the low income program, which boosts the benefit for individuals. But that's how we do it.
Right.
So we do it.
So where does the sort of drive to make sure that the networks are being upgraded and they're exploring all these new opportunities come from? Is it literally just that, or is it sort of writing on the wall, or
I think it's a that's a terrific question. Um, I'm trying. I think it's an innate feeling.
Yeah.
You have the local operators. Nobody wants to see their family or their community left behind.
Okay. That's
And
cool.
again, you have the statutory, backstop to make sure that the networks are, reasonably comparable to those that are in urban areas. But I don't think there's anyone. I'd hope, but I don't think there's any small community in the country that looks around and says, "Nah, we're good. We're going to stay right here in 2010, and we're not going to the next 15 years of technology." There is this drive. As human beings, we have this. That's why we went to the moon.
Right.
We want to advance. We want to grow. We want more opportunities. And if those achievements can be obtained through technology and connectivity, we want to keep pace. That's why we built a telephone network
Right.
100 years ago.
I agree with you. I think that is definitely true about the human spirit in general. And I think, it's something that people get kind of pessimistic about, but I think that the evidence points exactly to the opposite, right?
Nah, listen, you want to get pessimistic, we'll talk about AI. But for now, I'm joking.
Oh, we can go there if you want to.
I am an AI optimist.
I am too. I totally am. I absolutely am. And it's funny because it's like you can see Ludditism sort of take exactly the same path every single time any new thing comes out, right?
Hey, listen, anything is going to be um, any tool we have can be used for good or for evil. You can use a hammer to build a house, and you can use a hammer to break a window.
Hmm.
It comes in. I attended a series of lectures over the weekend on mitochondrial DNA and reproductive technologies and research, and just it's mind blowing. And you've got people going, "Ooh, we need to stay away from that." But the potential health benefits
Right.
are so great that again, do it smartly, do it intelligently, do it thoughtfully.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and one of the things that keeps coming up for AI,
right,
that is very relevant to this conversation is when we're talking about the skills gap, right? Like the
right,
tools that are coming out that people are designing based on the ability to have more network management and more telemetry from the network, depending on how much access you have to the consumer's network and, what agreements they've agreed to, when it comes to managed Wi-Fi, especially, right? Because
right.
Wi-Fi sucks, but you know,
Any managed service.
right?
Uh,
So,
yeah,
but these tools are helping make it so that that expertise divide, never mind the consumer's expertise divides, but when it comes to actually doing the network management and doing the support and having this skills gap of having new people coming in that don't know what to do, the best thing that AI is going to be doing is either A, helping solve these problems proactively before they even become problems, but
right,
also helping a support person get a little bit of an easier response about what is wrong, right?
right. And the worst thing that AI will do is, create those problems and create infiltrations. But again, I think that AI and I think that robotics and this is just going to create a seismic shift in the job market. But the fact of
Mhm.
the matter is, I don't know that we have, and I'm pretty sure about this, we don't have a greater proportion of people unemployed today than we did before the Industrial Revolution. Society adapts.
Right.
There can be a painful transition for some people, and I'm not discounting that. But society as a whole adapts, and the world moves forward, and hopefully we find ourselves in a better, healthier place than we did before.
Right.
So
Right.
we don't
So
have small.
in
Go ahead.
terms of like what you end up learning about the rural broadband consumers, right? Like I know what some more major surveys have said, but like when it comes to value added services that the operators can provide, like what are the top things that what are some of the top things that the consumers are actually wanting in that context is like we talk about telemedicine, but like you
Right.
know the things that the consumers understand, like is it home security, is it cybersecurity, is it that kind of thing.
So I think it's I think that IoT is. I think you have a lot of people who don't realize how much IoT they have in their house at this time.
Right.
Listen, you ask them how many connected devices do you have, and they think, well, I've got I've got my computer, a couple of phones, and I've got a Nest thermostat. And then you start pointing out, wait a minute, you've got doorbells and cameras, um, you have appliances, you've got sensors. So I think that the IoT environment is. I think we're going to get to slowly. We're getting to a point where people are saying, "Well, how did I live without that?" And no different than as we watch automotive technology increase, or just things now that were novelties in cars 20 years ago that now are standard equipment.
Right.
Whether that's the more than that, anti-lock brakes came out in the 80s on cars. Um, lane departure systems, smart braking systems.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
have granted now. So I think that in the consumer environment of IoT appliances and devices, I think we're going to see that gallop forward. Um, uh, aging in place is
Yeah.
aging in place is a big thing, and the question is, I think that we were, the big thing that we're talking about 10 years ago. Wait a minute, I can put a monitor on the refrigerator door, and I know whether somebody was out of bed that morning to get a glass of juice,
Right.
or smart pill bottles where I know from 30 miles away whether Auntie M took her I don't know her statin today.
Right. Right.
Um,
No, it's also one of the biggest use cases of Wi-Fi sensing, right? Is
right,
whether or not people have stopped moving in the house, and you need to go find out if they're okay, right?
right, right. So you've got that. You have. I don't know how prevalent it is, but the technology is there for smart flooring, which again, the question is, how do you have these sensors in place in a way that they're not that they don't seem intrusive, where they're
Yeah.
woven seamlessly, really, into everyday life. So it's floor sensors that monitor gait and movement, um, all sorts of things. Remote healthcare, I think, is going to be a big one. Again, not necessarily for its useful in acute medical trauma. It's useful for monitoring chronic conditions, and it's useful for just monitoring a person's vitals over a period of time to watch
Right.
trends as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. And to be able to get that telemetry and talk to your doctor without ever having to leave. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or at least to know, do I need to leave and go see my
Right.
doctor?
Right. 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 Yeah.
Take care of, through through an alert.
Right. So the one of the things that talking to the tier one operators about, especially internationally, right, where they have a little bit more competition, but and sometimes they have large research arms that have government funding and stuff like that. Um, they're sort of acutely aware of kind of like what you were saying before, where if as a local operator is acutely aware that they can be the technology leaders in their community. Is this the sort of stuff that they are willing to sort of jump on top of? Because the larger story is that because it's when we're talking about IoT specifically, right? The larger story is that because it's so fragmented and because it's this weird unanswered question of who owns what about the network and who's responsible for what failing when and whose job is it to secure what, and then on top of that, just the entire like work of setting up smart home stuff, right? Because right now it's all DIY. Many operators are taking ownership of that and saying, nope, this is now the smart home is part of our product offering. And it's
Yeah.
ours. We brand it as ours, and you get this thing that is branded as our thing. And here's, you're consuming it as, you know, as T-Mobile or as whoever, right? That's its entire product offering that we're taking ownership of it and offering it to you with the understand that we are going to make it easier for you, right?
Right. And I think we have that spectrum of responses among our members. We have some members that have seen these opportunities as an additional revenue opportunity. And we've had other members who have just kind of shrugged and said, listen, I'm not gonna send my customer a bill for, there might be a service call fee, but I'm not marketing that we're going out to help them set up these systems. They'll call us, we'll walk them through it over the phone, and that's no charge for that.
Cool. Cool.
It's this weird dynamic
Yeah.
in a good way.
Right.
In a good
Right.
way.
And so where do you think the difference in that dynamic comes from? Like,
Um, I don't know. Listen, every business ultimately reflects personalities,
yeah.
and it could either be personalities, or it could be that there's a firm that says, listen, we see the demand here is it's not high enough that we want to make this a billable function, or it's part of their business strategy.
Right.
And
Is part of the work then of the NTCA to like put people in contact, or at least in contact with companies that can sort of solve these problems for them as sort of a package deal, right?
so what we do is probably less on the vendor by vendor side, but what we certainly try to do is put people in touch with the ideas behind these industries.
Hmm.
Um, we had a meeting. Of last spring, I think. So I don't even know what month it is right now. It's March.
I feel you. I feel you.
So I had a meeting last spring. We had someone there who developed a smartwatch for survivors of domestic violence.
Cool.
Okay, so it's a Samsung watch, and she stripped out pretty much everything except emergency call functions, fall detection, heart rate monitors, a couple other things as well. And brought her out to our conference. She appeared on stage with a judge who has a courtroom in a rural area that's using teleconferencing for drug court management. And again, this was just an introduction of an idea to members. Says, hey, by the way, here
Right.
is just another sector where the technology works. And I found out last week that we have a community where their local law enforcement is implementing this smartwatch solution.
Awesome.
So it's getting people aware of this. These listen, on a day-to-day basis, our members are focused on those nuts and bolts of how do we get this network together. Running the business, keeping up with the regulations, keeping pace with the technology. So, part of the fun that I get to do is to let them know, hey, there's a specific ag tech application that your farmers might be interested in. We've got this universe of telehealth, and here are some examples. And they might not be something that your local hospital administrator is interested in, but
Mhm.
the local hospital administrator might look at that suite of services and say, I don't need that, but man, if I could get something to solve this problem.
Neat.
So,
Neat. That's really cool for it to be in the world that in the industry that we're in, right? Because it's like
yes,
we
yes,
inadvertently become the well, hilariously, right? We're connecting
right.
people, right?
Is there a word? Is there such a word as advertent?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. You're right. Is the
advertent.
opposite of that? Are we doing it on purpose?
Advertent. I don't know.
So, how I wanted to talk about speed tests.
Yeah,
Um, so when it comes to regulations, it's like having to go through the motions of proving it is that you're doing a certain level of service.
right.
I know the many options available for doing that, but I also know that like it's becoming a little weird in terms of what is actually the definition of good, right? And the difference between having a consistent latency network versus just being able to pump data through it, and like how you prove that,
Right.
and what's in the regulations and stuff. Is that like how where are things where are things with that?
So, the FCC has requirements, and these just came on the books within the past couple of years. And it's understandable. The FCC's position was you're receiving, you're receiving funding through a federally administered program. We want you to provide us with test results that when you're saying you're providing X, your network is actually providing X.
Mhm.
So we do that. It's a matter of making sure, there were some network upgrades that needed to be made. Um, you have to make sure that the modem and the customer premises equipment is capable of transmitting that information back to the company. Uh, we there's a delicate nature if you have a customer that doesn't have the equipment in house and you have to upgrade that customer premise equipment.
Yeah.
Uh, nobody wants to go to someone and say, "Hey, we've got a box that the government wants us to put into your house to measure your internet." It doesn't sell well. Uh, but again, no one's interested. No one's interested in monitoring where you're going on the internet. We just want to make sure that you
Yeah.
can get there
Yeah.
as fast
Exactly.
as we promised. We want to make sure that you can do that, and
Right. Right.
that's all that this is meant to do. It certainly introduces a layer of costs, a layer of regulatory compliance, um, and administrative burden. But that's again, it's the cost of doing business.
Right. Right. And I think everyone on the consumer side would do well to understand that if it was monitoring your communications is what people actually wanted to do, that's not how they would.
Right, right.
It would
What
already
was
be done, and you don't.
it's the old joke? The guy at the in the couch at his therapist's office, and the therapist is saying, "Trust me, there's no reason to be so paranoid. If everybody was out to get you, they would have gotten you by now."
It's true.
You know, if the
Oh man.
state was really interested in looking over your shoulder, they're not going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "We're here."
Right. Right.
So,
Cool. So what would you say to I don't know. It's like there's been a huge sort of sea change in the way that consumers engage with their operator, right?
right.
And it used to be very bad, right? And we know who used to get the worst customer support ratings in the entire country, right? And that company, who shall remain nameless, has taken great strides to turn that around, right? um, if we had to, as we who are advocates, I would say, because I definitely am, of advocates on the operator side who understand the pain involved in bringing these services to the consumer. What is one thing that you would say to the consumers out there that to change that outlook on that world, you know.
So it's I don't know how effectively I can speak to customers of other companies or on behalf of other customers serving their companies. Um, what I can say, and I've been around this industry for a while, and it's what we spoke about before. Uh, these locally operated providers are not driven by shareholder incentives because they don't have
Right,
shareholders.
right,
They're driven by what I like to call sociological incentives, and they want to provide the best service. They're invested in the community. They're often the largest employer. If you call customer service and speak with Miss Jennifer, uh, there's a good chance you know her from around town, and
right,
that's
right.
just the way small. That's just the way these small communities are. So I think that changes the. I think that changes the. That changes the nature of the customer corporate relationship. And what I mentioned before at that meeting we had, where we had we had the developer of this smartwatch. One of our audience members raised his hand, and he said that they have actually in place a track for their technicians to be trained by professionals who can teach them how to spot signs of trouble in a home.
Cool.
And again, they're not mandated reporters. You have people who work in school systems or social services who have a legal obligation to report if they see something. But just to be eyes in the neighborhood, if you see something amiss, and again,
Right.
that's looking after our community, and that's looking after our community.
Cool. That's awesome. That gives
Yeah,
me a lot of hope.
maybe you have to move to one of our communities.
We do okay around here. It's
We
kind of strange.
guarantee you good broadband. How's that?
And it's very strange in New Hampshire because um we we have our own state broadband program. But in the seacoast where I live, we were all wired up for fiber by Verizon, who was,
Really?
yeah, they were preparing to launch FiOS for us, and then they pulled out and sold everything to Fairpoint. But all the fiber was still there, so Fairpoint came along and was like, "Oh, why don't we just offer a fiber?" And it started down that road, and obviously they've been bought by Consolidated now, and it's the consolidation, for lack of a better term, is happening. But it's interesting that we're like simultaneously served by rural operators and by the big operators at the same time around here.
Right.
It all depends on when and where you were when certain stuff went down. But I always found it funny because this exact same guy who set me up for service with Fairpoint, right? And that was right after Verizon left, so it was brand new. This exact same guy who set me up for fiber service was the same guy 10 years later that when I went to go upgrade my service came in and gave me a new ONT. So
So they just, I imagine then that means they kept local staff
they did.
on board.
Actually, that was a big part of it. There was a big, like, the union had I think had such a big say in what was going on, and I think that was an absolute required part of what happened because it was contentious for a while, and there was some political advertising around it, and then and that I think that was one of the requirements because it would definitely all the same people stick around. So
That would make sense,
yeah, yeah, but good,
especially for a union shop.
yeah, for sure, right. But we do all right around here. I like it. All right. Well, thanks, Josh. I really appreciate this. Like I said, send me some of those links because I would like to make sure that that ends up here because I as much of a firm believer as I am that all of us are facing the same issues. Like we we end up getting siloed in our own organizations, right?
Right.
Even the advocacy organizations. So I think it'd be helpful, for everybody to learn from each other when it comes to stuff like this. And I can send you some stuff too. It's the stuff that outside of the testing situation that we do
Mhm.
for stuff at QA Cafe. We kind of try to stay on the forefront of technologies because it's the stuff that we're going to have to test in the gateways later, right? And
Right.
um, it's the horizon now is these interoperable CPE that you're able to deploy applications on, and all of the applications that can possibly be running on this thing that is now much more powerful than it ever was. And so it can do all kinds of stuff like, and it makes it easier for the operators to upgrade stuff in the future, right? Because they only have to deploy a container and spin that up, and the software lifecycle gets a lot faster and it's a lot safer. But that's where things are going right now, where we we see this vision of the home gateway, the CPE, becoming something more than just this box that consumers set on a shelf and forget about it, and more of a
Right.
participatory thing like the refrigerator.
It's yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's some of the apps that are coming out of the woodwork because this is a thing is really cool, and a lot of them have to do with cybersecurity, but the sky's the limit when it comes to stuff like that. So it'd be cool for everybody to know that that's going on. All right. Well, thank you, Josh, and we'll talk again soon. And as usual, everybody on here, if you want to hear more about cool stuff like this and sort of the edges of the broadband world that you might not have ever heard of before, please do subscribe to this podcast, and you'll automatically be able to hear us in the future. Get more great guests on, and above all, own the nerdy things that you love and have fun doing them. Thanks, John.
All right. Take care. Thanks. Bye bye.